AI application delivery. Victoria has a big secret. Inferring at the edge. VMware's partner purge. Walmart using AI for automation. Quantum might break RSA faster than we thought. And we're going to take a closer look at the impact on tariffs and cloud computing in this week's episode of the Tech Field Day Rundown. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tech Field Day Rundown. Today is Wednesday, June the 4th. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I'm very glad to be back from Super Secret Security Field Day. And it's a very important day. It's National Hug Your Cat Day, also known as Why is this Cuisinart trying to kill me? It's you take the good, you take the bad, right? Hugging a cat is always an exercise in restraint on somebody's part. But luckily, I am not restrained in welcoming my new co-host for this episode, Mr. Brad Gregory. Brad, welcome to the show.
Great to see you again. It's been a while. Good to see you.
It is, and we're very glad to have Brad joining us on National Cheese Day. But I promise you, the only thing cheesy around here is the day. The news is very important, and we've got some great stories coming up. The first one that I want to launch into is about AI and inferencing, because AI inferencing and networking isn't about using AI to manage the network. It's about delivering AI workloads with the same precision, scalability, and resilience that we apply to modern application delivery. Inferencing is really just another demanding workload that thrives on optimized load balancing, latent sensitivity routing, and secure edge delivery. And Brad, this is something I know that is near and dear to your heart. So why don't you give us a little bit of background into why you think that AI is really just another workload and not something super special that's going to revolutionize the way that networking packets are sent?
Yeah, thanks, Tom, because in fact, that's what it is, right? I think we've spent so much time in talking about training, talking about how, we knew the Ultra Ethernet Consortium, how we have to do all these things different for training. It's totally different networks. We have to learn new things. Uh, and rightly so, right? I mean, you got to train it before you can put it out there for everybody to consume. Um, and then we moved to inferencing, right? Inferencing is still kind of like old networking, but with a few tweaks, right? The network's going to have to behave, function a little differently. Um, so there's a lot to learn in the inferencing in the training space. There's some to learn in the inferencing space, but I would argue there's not a whole lot to learn in the application delivery space, right? We've been talking so much about training, so much about inferencing, but even at that, inferencing is just the front door, right? I've got to have just like a web server was the front door for applications, right? You got to have something to serve the trained models up. So once I started digging into it more and trying to figure out, okay, what does application delivery look like? It became pretty obvious that it looks like what it's always looked like, right? I've got a load balance to it. I've got to look at the context of what I sent to it to load balance on the back end. When load balancers first started many, many years ago, they were pretty rudimentary load balancers. Then they started getting a lot more sophisticated, and then they became application delivery controllers. So when I look at how we offer up AI applications to users, it's simply application delivery. You have to, think about a couple little tweaks. In the old days, it was SQL injection attacks that got you in trouble. Now it's prompt injection that'll get you in, attacks that will get you in trouble. Um, you want to load balance to different models based on the what the prompt sent it, right? So if you type in how do I write something in Python? Then maybe load balance me to Llama instead of Claude, for example, right? So I think just the availability, the contextual information, sending me to the correct resource on the back end. How do I secure it? Sounds a lot like what we've been doing for the last 25 years, right? Since load balance really came to the fore. So not a lot. Think think old is new again, and just apply those same principles, and I think, the application delivery aspect for AI will be easier to understand and easier to wrap your hands around, not so much for training and kind of for inferencing. A lot of the old still applies with inferencing, but a lot of the old really applies for, application delivery. Victoria's Secret, I heard they had a pretty long weekend last week. They spent a lot of time fighting a security incident, took their website offline for almost 4 days. Customers attempting to shop were greeted with a pink screen telling them the site was offline due to an issue that was being addressed. Details surrounding the event have been disclosed, but there were some communications issues between the website team, the PR team, as the website at one point disclosed the nature of the security breach, while the PR team released a statement said it was an upgrade gone wrong. Your thoughts?
So there's two things to think about here. The first thing, which is kind of the important thing, is always make sure that your PR team and your security team are on the same page when they talk about what's going on. Because if the PR team is like, "Oh yeah, we tried to, fix PHP and something broke. Sorry, no big deal," and the website team that's working with security team is like, "Oh yeah, it was a breach." Like one of those things is no big deal, although it would have really been hard to justify it being an upgrade that was, took your website off for 4 days. But the security thing is going to get everybody's attention, and that's kind of what happened last week. Was that everybody noticed that this was? It actually started happening kind of like Sunday, but it wasn't until we got into the hours of Monday that everything went offline. Here's the second thing, though. You've got to read between the lines a little bit because, of course, they're not ready to disclose exactly what happened, and they may not tell us the exact story, but they took the website offline and you couldn't order anything. And I've heard from some sources, according to Reddit and other places, that a lot of what was going on in the stores was also offline. It's like you couldn't order things that were not already on the shelves and stuff like that. That to me says there was a breach of the ordering system and they probably got some PII of the users, probably credit card data. That's what my worry is. The only reason you would not immediately disclose what was going on is if it involves something that's massively PII. In this case, PCI DSS impacts. You got credit cards, that's a problem. Why are you even storing credit card data? Well, I know because you click the little box that says remember this for future stuff. But they're going to have to sort this whole thing out. There's probably going to be some impacts with their customer base. Realistically speaking, I don't know if this is going to be a huge impact or not, because one of the things we've seen over the last few months and years is that ultimately customers are brand loyal. So they're going to probably come back to buy things here. I mean, it's not like you have a ton of options to shop for, especially ones that have local storefronts. Like I can ship it to the store or whatever, especially if you feel uncomfortable having things like that shipped to your home. But I think that they're gonna have to actually come out and say what it was. Like, they can't play this game anymore. I think really what they're doing is they're trying to get their ducks in a row so that they know if there's going to be, charges filed or some kind of a class action lawsuit, that they're ready to fight it. So sorry if you couldn't buy some fun stuff last week, but, as Marshall Stacker Pentecost always says, reset the clock because it's just gonna be another breach before you know it, and next time it might not be something nearly so fun. Brad, there's some new reporting out that discusses the likelihood that AI inferencing is going to be huge for edge computing. Per this report, doing inferencing on the edge reduces time and costs for transferring data in and out of cloud storage, as well as lowering latency for decision making. And by doing all of the work on the compute edge, you can reduce huge cloud overhead costs. I know how much it costs to spin up an Amazon instance, and it ain't cheap anymore. Also, one of those little side benefits to all those of us in the security space is the fact that you can be relatively certain you know where that data is, so you don't have to worry about data sovereignty issues. I guess the question that I have for you, Brad, is should we be looking at moving all of our AI inferencing data out to the edge instead of loading it all in the cloud?
Yes, probably. I think for the longest time we've been looking for that edge killer app, right? The edge has been kind of a nebulous term, but I think inferencing could be the killer app that the edge is looking for a couple of reasons. One is, users are a lot more dispersed than they used to be. Not everything happens around the major metros, and then two, um, they're just from a standpoint of space, power, cooling, you can't really build that many data centers around Ashburn anymore. So you'll see training can be done anywhere, and inferencing needs to be pushed out closer to the users that are literally anywhere now, right? So, um, and then two, um, it's hard to do everything in the cloud because you've got a lot of data that means a lot to you, that's proprietary, that's sovereign, that you want to keep close to the vest. So, I think you'll start seeing things like RAG, retrieval augmentation generation, federated AI, things where the trained data or the data that will be presented back to you will be a combination of a foundational public model with your own individual tailored data, or your own data that's tailored to your needs. That's the retrieval augmentation generation, right? I'm gonna send a query out there. Some part of it will come from the foundational model that's more public. Some part of it will come from your data. that's more private. Put those two together, and I've got an augmented response. It comes back to you. So um, that's one great use case where I think inferencing at the edge, as it applies to AI, specifically in the RAG context and the federated AI context, might be the killer app that the edge has been looking for quite a few years now. If you're a registered partner of VMware by Broadcom, we've got some bad news. The company is eliminating the lowest partner tier completely. Existing partners have 60 days to either move up or move on. According to Lori Falco, head of global partner programs, the vast majority of these partners are inactive and lack capabilities to support customers. This means VMware by Broadcom has three partner tiers: Pinnacle, Premier, and Select. These tiers will now have increased requirements to maintain the relationship, including dedicated sales and support personnel. Analysts are suggesting that the move could force smaller customers away from VMware in the future.
So here's my problem with this. We just got through with this whole big brouhaha about VMware's partner program, right? They wanted to take their top 1,000 or 2,500 accounts private inside of VMware. They've been slowly pushing everyone to be selling only VMware Cloud Foundation. There's no essentials bundles anymore. What did they think the natural outcome of this was going to be? Like, I know a lot of people who were registered as VMware partners that really only resold to a couple of places, like, maybe themselves and a couple of other local partners. Well, if you don't have a foundations bundle to sell anymore, like if that was the reason why you registered, this makes total sense, right? We're cutting out the people on that low end. To the comment by Lori Falco, yes, if there's nothing for them to sell, then they're all going to be inactive, right? Like we've been doing this dance for the last year and change of what's going to be available, how can we do this? And any partner program worth its salt is going to say that you have to have people who are trained on the solutions, that are trained in the way that they need to be sold, and to go out there and do it. And I think that this could potentially be the carrot for some of those larger organizations that are trying to look to differentiate themselves to be able to offer these solutions, right? It's like if you go out and you dedicate personnel to being able to do this, if you kind of follow our guidelines for selling VMware Cloud Foundation, if you have a high attach rate, maybe we'll toss you some of these bigger partners so that you can continue to maintain the relationships you have with them. Because I have a funny feeling what's happened is that a lot of those large partners had really good relationships, and when VMware came knocking without the partner, the companies were like, well, I'd rather deal with the people that I know. And so I think this is kind of pushing back on the partners. However, I do agree with some of the analyst talk. If you're cutting people out completely, then the first thing they're going to want to do is say, screw you, and they're going to go sell somebody else. Now, I don't necessarily know that that's going to work the way that you think it's going to work. I think ultimately what's going to end up happening is that Amazon and Nutanix are going to gain. And then the rest of everybody is going to, they're going to be picking up the pieces. I don't know what this means for VMware customers, but I promise you, it's probably time to start thinking about what your migration strategy is going to be, because you're either going to be moving to Cloud Foundation or you're going to be moving to something that's not VMware. All right, Walmart is using a new approach to AI by focusing on small task specific agents instead of large all in one platform systems. These AI agents handle specific jobs like data entry or even speeding up product design, which is leading to clear improvements in how the company runs. Walmart also combines multiple agents to manage much more complex tasks like their smart shopping assistant, which uses both in house and external AI models. This focus strategy makes AI a lot easier to scale and a lot more cost effective, and it could serve as a model for other businesses looking to improve automation. Brad, does Walmart's approach to maybe smaller discrete AI agents instead of one big behemoth make a whole lot of sense, considering that Walmart is kind of the behemoth in the retail space?
Yeah, it does. A lot of agents are a good thing. A lot of agents can be a bad thing too, right? That's a lot of crosstalk that's going to happen. That needs to be secured. It needs to be, probably thought about in a little different way. And it kind of goes back to the discussion we were having a minute ago, right? This is just another way to talk about, it's just retrieval augmentation generation on a grand scale, right? Instead of having, one master model talking to a tailored model, you're gonna have all these models talking to each other, right? What in the future, what would dictate a model? Is it one agent? Is it what is a small language model at some point, right? Um, so I think once, yes, that's the power, right? I mean, you get a lot of intelligence out there, and a lot of data points, and they all come together, and they start, um, the collective power of all those data points to come together to give you one retrieval augmented generated AI output is really the power of any system, right? It's kind of like Metcalfe's law in motion. The power of the system is vastly, exponentially more powerful. The more agents are talking to each other, the more connections are talking to each other. So I think this might, agents talking to each other will be the what interconnection has been for the last, decade or 15 years, right? The power of getting people to talk directly to each other peer to peer. I think the agents, AI agents are just the next iteration of that. And it's powerful, also dangerous. New study from Google Quantum AI shows that breaking the 2048-bit RSA encryption may require far fewer quantum resources than once thought. Instead of 20 million qubits, the task could now be done with under a million noisy qubits in about a week. While today's quantum computers aren't powerful enough yet, this major drop in requirements highlight just how quickly quantum computing is advancing. Since RSA is widely used to secure data, the findings stress the urgent need to switch to quantum safe encryption to protect against future threats. Your thoughts?
This is the same old problem that we know we've had ever since sneakers came out, right? Is we know that eventually someone will create a computer that is strong enough to instantly factor primes and be able to figure out these keys. And honestly, even at a million qubits, you're still looking at days to break any one specific RSA encrypted key. And the problem that I have with this is yes, it's an attention grabbing headline, but you have to understand something. The most powerful quantum computer on the planet right now from Google has about 1,100 qubit capacity. You need a million to even consider this. And notice that it said a million noisy qubits. So, for those of you who may not have seen my conversation about this, one of the problems that we have with quantum computing is just the amount of noise that's generated. You have to have lots of qubits to solve every potential permutation of the equation, and then you have to find that equation. That's why error correction is so important to quantum computing. And if you can get the right amount of error correction, you can significantly reduce the number of qubits that you need to break any particular key. The problem is, even with the leaps and bounds that we've had over the last few years, we're still nowhere near as powerful as we need to get. Even with exponential growth, we've still got several more years before we get there. But we already have candidate keys that are quantum resistant that use lattice based encryption technologies, which is really difficult for quantum computers to break. And for those of you out there who are on the crypto chain, you don't have to worry about Bitcoin being broken anytime soon because that whole proof of work thing and elliptical curve technology make it a lot harder to break than just if it was just a simple, and I say simple, RSA 2048 bit key. The issue is that we really do have to be looking at what the likelihood is that we either are going to need to re-encrypt the data that's already at rest that is insecure, or that we're going to need to basically remove it and then move on to these more resistant keys. But I'll tell you, this is not the first time, the second time, or the 15th time we solved this problem. I can go back to just about any hashing or encryption algorithm that was weak in the past that is effectively broken today. And we've had these problems forever. The key is that we always have to be one step ahead of where we're at. And we did that whenever we submitted those candidate keys to the to NIST to be authorized. I mean, I don't remember what they got named. They're just numbers now, but it was dilithium and Kyber and all the rest of them because they're solving the problem that we have and they're doing it early enough that we're not like falling all over ourselves to implement fixes that will eventually cause problems. See also the Y2K problem. Like that was admittedly a Herculean effort, but it was very late. We should have been way ahead of that. And here, I think we are. And what we're seeing out of this is people that are starting to ask the right questions, not just how can I encrypt this data, but is this data that I should be keeping that I'm going to need to encrypt? And I think that that is a better question to be asking because if we can stop storing so much data, then it's less likely that the encryption that we're using is going to be broken. All right, we had a story we wanted to take a closer look at. And undoubtedly, if you have been watching the news at all, you are familiar with tariffs because they are the thing that has been dominating the economic talk. Well, new global tariffs are making it more expensive and complicated for enterprises to manage their cloud services across regions. Changes are causing wildly unpredictable costs and creating challenges for organizations that want to adopt a global cloud strategy. And in order to stay ahead of that, companies are going to need to improve visibility. They're going to need to automate processes, and they're going to tailor their governance to each region. Now, what I think is funny is that we've been talking about data sovereignty issues for years, right? Where is my data located? How is it being accessed? And those are security questions. So they're not that big of a deal, right? We'll solve them. But now that we're seeing that those data sovereignty issues are coupled with economic considerations, such as the price of certain resources in instances being wildly higher because of additional tariffs, not just demand. Now suddenly the people who didn't care about data sovereignty care about their pocketbook. So, Brad, I'm going to let you start off on this. Um, what is it about this that's causing people consternation? Is it just the fact that there's a tariff on cloud computing, incidentally, or is it more that they're worried that this could create asymmetrical demand?
That's a good question. I think what's causing all of us consternation is you don't know what it's gonna be, right? If a tariff rate was locked in at X% over the next 12 months, 18 months, and that was the new agreement, then you could say, "Okay, we have some certainty, we know how to work around it," right? I think what's frustrating is just the whiplash of the tariff rate itself. Do I refactor applications? Do I adopt as a service instead of, or do I adopt OpEx instead of CapEx? It's the unknown, just like everybody else. The IT industry is not insulated from it because, to your point, we're all, economics is driving everything behind the scenes. So I think just the unknown, not knowing what to do is very, very frustrating. If you had something to deal with, like we dealt with supply chain issues during COVID, right? You knew it was going to take quite a while to get, whatever piece of hardware you were working with. So you figured out ways around it. You figured out a way to get to the other side of the supply chain problem. What is the other side of this problem? I don't think anybody knows yet because nobody knows what the rates are going to be. Nobody knows, you know, um, what agreements are going to be signed. Nobody knows who's going to be at the table, who won't be at the table, who's going to pay a bigger price, than the other. So the uncertainty, it manifests itself in so many ways, right? It just paralyzes everything.
It does. And I'm going to say two words that I think everybody gets tired of hearing is chilling effect, right? But this is absolutely something that you need to take into account when you look at what's going on. People don't make decisions on the spur of the moment, even when it comes to something admittedly as ridiculous as spot pricing for cloud instances, right? Like that is the number one thing that I've always heard that people want to use multi-cloud for is arbitrage. This AWS instance is expensive for the next 3.5 hours. So I'm going to move it over to Azure and I'm going to run it in Azure because they got a discount on storage or whatever. Who knows what it is? You're playing around with the money, but what you're doing that's more important is you're forcing people into making specific decisions for their workloads that exclude other areas. So, for example, if there is a tariff on importing cloud computing workloads into a specific country, then I'm going to craft my policy so that I don't import those into that country no matter what. And it's one thing if the tariffs are asymmetrical, right? Like one country has higher tariffs for certain things, but lower tariffs for other things. The problem ultimately is going to be that companies are just going to throw their hands up in the air and say, I'm going to go where it makes the most sense, where it's the most stable, and I'm going to stay there. Because that's the other thing. If this was just a blanket tariff across the entire organization and we didn't have to worry about things moving too much, then I could maybe see, like, maybe I'll raise the prices to my customers. I'll eat some of this. But what we're seeing is whiplash, right? One day we have a tariff, the other day we don't. But maybe we might have another one in the future. We don't know yet. It's up to the whims of whoever's putting the tariff in place. I can't plan my organization around how somebody wakes up in the morning and decides that they want to do things. And this goes against every classical economic definition of a tariff that you've ever seen, right? Tariffs are considered to be protectionist. And that's why I don't understand why this is happening, right? Like, why would you put a blanket tariff on everything? Like, if you're trying to be protectionist about things like industry, you'd put a tariff on finished goods, but not on raw materials to encourage people to import raw materials into your country and produce finished goods here. It's a little bit different when it comes to cloud computing, which is why I don't understand it. It'd be like saying, I'm going to put a tariff on storage, but not compute because I want you to do the work, but not save the data. And by putting a blanket on everything, then they're just going to say, okay, well, we're going to stay in this instance over here. And if cloud computing companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, IBM, whomever are really smart about this, what they're going to do is they're going to offer instances that are local but are not impacted by this. And that is going to cause a lot of these global organizations to realign a little bit differently. And what you're going to get out of it is effectively islands of data out there in the cloud that can never move. So you're going to have to be more robust in the way that you build your applications, because you can't just migrate from Reston to Corvallis and hope that US East or US West 1 is up instead of US East 1. And I don't know that that's something that developers are really prepared to do right now.
Well, and then everything we're talking about is in the context of hardware, physical asset. What about when tariffs, they've talked about applying tariffs to services, right? So if you have services, if you want to buy services to refactor, rewrite applications to get around a hardware tariff, right? Or an asset tariff, what does that look like? So it's almost like this matrix of tariffs that you have to apply in, this three-dimensional chess matrix. And it's like I don't know how people are gonna figure it out. Again, certainty, bad certainty is better than no certainty, right? And I just we don't even have bad certainty right now. It's just uncertainty on top of uncertainty. It changes day. I don't, yeah, a very very tough time on so many levels to try to figure out what you want to do with your org and what you want to do with the technology based on the way the stuff is coming at you in so many directions.
Well, there may not be a lot of certainty around that, but I can tell you one thing that I am absolutely certain of, and that is Tech Field Day, because we have great events that are coming up over the next couple of weeks that you're going to want to tune in for. One of them is happening now, actually. If you want to tune into techfieldday.com, you can check out Cloud Field Day 23, where we're talking about some of the very same things that we just discussed in this episode. Alistair Cook is out in San Francisco. He's talking to some great companies. Head over to techfieldday.com. You can tune in for the live stream, but you can also check out the list of presenters. You're not going to want to miss that. And then I am going to be winging my way to California at the end of the week, because I am going to be at Cisco Live next week. We're going to be hearing great presentations from OpenGear, Cisco, and Viavi. Check out techfieldday.com for more details and the presentation schedule. And then I'm going to take like a week off and maybe enjoy the weather. Okay, I'm kidding. It's summer. I'm not going to enjoy the weather, but I'm going to be back in July after Independence Day. We're going to be back with Networking Field Day 38. We've signed some really great companies. In fact, we just signed a couple of them this week. But if you want to go to techfieldday.com and learn more details about who's going to be there presenting, who's going to be there as a delegate, I encourage you to do that. But I also encourage you to check out some of Brad's stuff. So, Brad, if people want to learn more about what you do and see some of your writing, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, thanks. LinkedIn's a good place. I'll put them all on LinkedIn. I also have a website, mcnstrategies.com, which is my consulting company. So, yeah, I would love to get people's feedback. And if there's a subject you want to delve into, let me know. I'd be glad to research and write a blog out there for the larger community to consume. So, thanks, Tom.
Absolutely. And we want to thank each and every one of you for watching this episode of the Tech Field Day Rundown. Remember that we post new episodes every Wednesday. We post them on YouTube. So if you want to subscribe to the Tech Field Day Plus YouTube channel, you can check that out. You can also subscribe to us in your favorite podcast application of choice. Just look for the Tech Field Day Rundown. And we're streaming it on TechStrong TV as well. Don't forget that there is now a TechStrong TV app for your tablet, phone, and your set top box. So if you want to have us up running in the background, or maybe program it at your dentist's office, we would love to bore the kiddos with all of this great tech talk. I mean, they may not even need laughing gas anymore. Don't forget that you can also catch us on your other TechStrong and Futurum Group properties, because we always pop up and we always have fun things to say. We're going to be back next Wednesday. Well, somebody will be, because I'm going to be in San Diego. I'm going to be out there with a beach chair and trying to avoid the sun, actually. But there will be great co-hosts here for the rundown. And we will be talking about all of the great IT news that has come out over the last week. Until then, for myself, Tom Hollingsworth, and for my great co-host, Mr. Brad Gregory, thanks for tuning in for the rundown. Go eat some cheese and give that cat a hug for us. We'll see you next week.